Well, welcome into the first ever Accurate Sports podcast. This is a podcast about NCAA D1 men's college basketball, fatherhood and sonship, and thinking deeper about why things really matter. I'm your host, Curtis D. Acker, here with my color commentator and father, Mark Acker. Before we get started, you can follow us on X, Instagram, and TikTok, along with subscribing on YouTube under the handle Accurate B-Ball. That is ACKERATBBALL. If you have stories we'd like to cover, comments on what you'd like to see, or anything else, please email accurateball@gmail.com. That is the same spelling at ACKERATBBALL. Dad, today's our first episode ever, so let's start by introducing ourselves to the viewers and listeners on who we are, our background in basketball, and sports in general. Why don't you take it away?
Sounds great. Thanks, Curtis. Thanks for having me, and hello, everybody out there. So my background in basketball, it's definitely one that doesn't have a lot of fanfare when it comes to my playing experience. I was definitely a very mediocre high school basketball player, so quickly realized that my career wasn't in basketball, and I really became a big fan of the game just from watching the game a ton in college, in my young adulthood after college. I watched Big Mondays relentlessly, 7 p.m. to 2 in the morning. I'd be up watching games, East Coast to West Coast, and really took the game in and came to love it during that time period. And then after that I started reffing several years, and then eventually the last 10 years I've actually been coaching the game. So I've been able to experience the game from several different viewpoints. And on top of that, as just an overall sports fan and being very involved in sports, I've coached several different sports. I coached golf, I've coached baseball, obviously basketball, and I've also coached hockey. So I've learned a lot from various sports, a lot of overlap. And so I think I bring maybe a different view of not only basketball, but of all sports together and through my experiences. So that's a little bit about me. Curtis, I know you also got into basketball a little later after high school, but why don't you give us a little history about what you have with the game and your sports background as well?
I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I was playing hockey through my youth and played a lit's bit in college. Was fortunate enough to play junior and for ACHA at Niagara University. And then I ended up becoming a junkie in college like yourself, Dad. I started with NBA 2K. That's what originally got me into basketball in general on the PS4 and some casual pickup. Then I was fortunate enough to work as a manager on the D1 women's team at Niagara University. That developed into a volunteer coaching work with you and your team when I came home. And now I'm a sportscasting major here at Full Sail University in the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. So those are real shortened versions of our basketball and sporting backgrounds. And we want to claim that we are not, experts on this type of thing. We are just a couple of very dedicated fans that want to talk about men's college basketball, because that's something that you and I have very much bonded with throughout our lives here is men's college basketball. So with that, let's get started with our stories today. So how this is going to work now that we're done with the introductions is we've got 3 top stories in college basketball from this week. Then after that, we're going to do a segment where we got 5 stories that we're excited to watch this year. And then lastly, we'll finish up with something that will remain a staple here on the Accurate Sports podcast, ACORN'S Attic. So to start it off with our stories from the week, major story coming in recruitment, Cooper Flagg has committed to Duke. But the spin that we want to take on this story is talking about Duke's stopping power, or staying power here in the NCAA basketball world. They were blue blood since, Krzyzewski ended up coming and being the coach now since retired, and John Shire is now the head coach. And they didn't meet the expectations of a typical Duke team last year. And even the last years with Coach K didn't really meet those expectations. But it seems like that's turning around here with the Cooper Flagg recruitment. He's a player that some are considering to be the best prospect in high school. He's the #1 prospect on ESPN's 2024 recruiting class. He announced October 30th he's committing to Duke over the reigning March Madness champions, the UConn Huskies. And this kid's a long, versatile athlete with a complete game. The kid can shoot, pass. He's also a solid rim protector. You can see him playing the 2 through the 5 in college. He joins Isaiah Evans, Con Kneppel, and Darren Harris, all top 50 prospects in the 2024 recruiting class, in the Duke recruiting class. And one thing to note is that this is not typical for Duke to have 4 players that are returning that were starters last year. And also they have a solid recruiting class this year as well. Those players that are returning are Tyrese Proctor, Jeremy Roach, Mark Mitchell, and Kyle Filipowski. Then they get 4 5-star recruits according to 247 Sports, which is Caleb Foster, Jared McCain, Sean Stewart, along with TJ Power. So, Dad, I just want to ask you, what does this really mean for Duke's staying power and becoming that blue blood program that they were again? Because it seems like they're setting themselves up for not just 1 year of success in a one-and-done player like what typically happens at Duke, what's happened in the past. It seems like they're building kind of like a actual franchise here.
Right, exactly. Yeah, obviously, we'll have to see how that all plays out. But the fact that so many players returned this year shows well for Shire and what he's building. Is that return to almost the dynasty that from my era coming in. Watching college basketball, Duke every year was the team to beat. And I'm a Syracuse fan. I'm living in upstate New York, Western New York. I mean, I every year Duke couldn't lose enough games for me as a selfish Syracuse fan. Obviously, they're a great program and deserve a lot of credit for everything that was done there. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I think getting the early commitment or the commitment from here from Flagg's really good is a signature piece to a lot of good recruiting underneath that, and like you said, a sign that probably that maybe Duke's here to stay and can build a master program, right? Like some of the other programs around, as opposed to, like you said, the one and done. You come to Duke, you show your stuff your first year, and then you're off to the next level. So, yep. Totally agree with you on that. Yep, that was a huge sign, and obviously the fact that he's in Duke means he's not anywhere else if he follows through and finishes up that commitment. So it's a big win and a big minus on the other side for the other teams that were vying for him.
Yeah, losing out on Flag is going to be tough.
That's
now
right.
Let's move into the next 2 stories, which are a little bit related. We got Mackenzie Mgbako, who's playing for Indiana this season, and then Nae'Qwon Tomlin, who's supposed to be playing for Kansas State this season. Mgbako is playing despite being arrested earlier in October. On the 22nd, he was arrested at Taco Bell for a criminal trespass along with resisting law enforcement, which are both A-class misdemeanors. The resisting of law enforcement charge will not be pursued. However, the criminal trespass is going to be pursued, and he actually pled not guilty. So it'll be an ongoing story where the pretrial conference happens on December 4th. That's when it's scheduled for right now. But Mike Woodson basically took a stance and said, hey, this happens, and we're gonna move forward with this. Actually, that's exactly what he said. He said, that's behind us. We've got to move forward, is what Indiana head coach Mike Woodson said. But then you've got the flip side of things with Jerome Tang at Kansas State, who's their head coach. He indefinitely suspended his top returning scorer, Nae'Qwon Tomlin, who was arrested Sunday, October 29th for disorderly conduct, brawling, or fighting at a local sports bar. And he was also the team's leading returner in rebounds, steals, and blocks per game. So a big piece that they're losing in that Kansas State team that was able to make an Elite 8 run last March. And Cam Carter's now the only returning starter for K-State. But they do have Arthur Kaluma, who they got in the transfer portal this past offseason. So that should help mitigate that loss. Right. And then you also got David Ngeson, who started a few games for him last year and is probably going to step into that starting 5 spot now that Tomlin is no longer involved with the team. Now, Dad, from a coach's perspective, you're not going to see this at JV basketball level at all? We hope to never never see it. But just from a coaching perspective, what do you do in this scenario? A player gets arrested. They damage the reputation of the team. They damage the standard that the team sets themselves for. So do you take the forgiving approach like Woodson did, or do you take the more disciplinary coach like Tang ended up deciding?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the rules. Some of it, like you said, we don't have this level of issue at the JV high school level, but we do. You have, as a coach, you have to set ground rules on whatever it is you want to decide on, and to be careful with those rules so that to allow some flexibility, knowing that different situations, player to player, may require a different level of action as a coach or as an organization. So I don't know the particulars at each of the schools and the rules around these types of situations, but I'd like to think that that each team, as a coach, as a coaching staff, as an organization up to the athletic director and maybe even higher, are looking at the human being involved in a situation, not the basketball player and what it's going to mean to my team.
Right.
So obviously, in the K-State case, it's more severe to the team. But I'd like to think that each team put the action, acted accordingly to the player, to the human, to the person, right? And what's best for them. In one case, right, maybe it's better just keep plugging along, keep playing. Right? It's important for you to stay integrated with the team and stay close to the team because we feel that's where your family is now, and we want to build that. Right? That's one of the big things that I know that they preach there. Not that Kansas State doesn't do that, but maybe the situation is there where it'd be better. Hey, look at you've got bad influences around you in the team, in the organization, or involved with the extraneous things as part of being on the team. It'd be better for you to separate and maybe look to a different place to find your support and build yourself back up again. Learn from what has happened in that situation. So that's the way I look at it, and trying to look at it as a more of a positive light of what's best for that human being and moving them forward. Definitely, I believe in second chances and learning from mistakes. Certainly, I've made enough myself. Always evaluating and sharpening the saw along the way. So
yeah, and we don't.
That's kind of my take on it.
We don't know the full situation either, right?
Of course, right.
But we don't know if Tomlin's already gotten in trouble before and didn't get arrested, but they were like, hey, if this happens again, you're done. Maybe exactly. There was I think there was a little bit of what this player means to the team involved in the Indiana situation. Like, Mgbako was the number 9 recruiting guy this past year.
Right.
In the 2023 ESPN's recruiting class. He was 9th. And Indiana doesn't really have anyone on the team to fill the role that Mgbako is supposed to this year. Whereas with the Nae'Qwon Tomlin situation, you do have David Ngesson, who already does have existence as starting center, as I've mentioned. So there is a little bit of, okay, well, maybe we don't necessarily need you on the team then. But Tang did also make a statement that even though he was no longer involved with the team, that they would still support him afterwards.
Right, exactly. Right. Just because you're not on a team doesn't mean you just say goodbye. Nice knowing you. Have a good life. Right. There's other means to do that as well. So it's great to hear that.
Absolutely. Don't burn a bridge.
Right.
Let's move into segment 3. Our next segment, the 5 stories that we're excited to watch this year. There's plenty of interesting storylines, players on teams, players in the game, and here are a few that caught our eye to be interesting that maybe aren't the top teams out there like you're hearing about with everyone else, but fun stories to watch and see if they unfold the correct way throughout the season. So let's start out with your fandom, Syracuse. First year without Jim Boeheim. Is that aura going to continue in Central New York, or will it return to New York? It's kind of left the past few seasons. So, Dad, give a little insight onto what you're looking forward to in watching with Syracuse this season.
Yeah, I love Boeheim. Nothing against him. Obviously, he was a fantastic coach. Lots of great players that went through the system. National championship. Lots of great memories from his time. Long time there, running the show. For me, I was hoping he was going to kind of walk out the doors with his kids, with his boys when they graduated. to me, that was the Hollywood story there to kind of end things that way. But obviously, that didn't happen. And I understand it, but say again.
You wanted to keep going.
Yeah, he wanted to keep going, right? And I understand that too, right? That's what I was just gonna get into. Right? I understand that drive to, to keep going. But in any event, yeah, that was my story, not his story, and it's his story to tell. So good for him. But yeah, no, I'm excited about Autry. I think, certainly one thing we're gonna see, or I've read anyways, is the 2-3 zone that Boeheim was known for from a defensive perspective. That's done, right? This is going to be a much different looking team when it comes to on the defensive end. More of an up-tempo, pressure-related, man-to-man defense. He's got a lot of work to do there. I even read one of his interviews or saw one of his interviews where he said that's a challenge here. We've got players that have been here 2-3 years, haven't played man-to-man defense for 2 or 3 years. So reteaching the nuance of man-to-man defense, right? It's not going to, you can't just snap your fingers and make that happen. But obviously that's going to be a big change. How much does that turn into more transition offense as opposed to half-court offense that Boeheim was known for, really run a lot of threes, sets to get threes, that kind of look. So how will that change as well? This year, a lot of 4 core freshmen from last year's class all came back for a second year, and it's a great sign for Autry. I think that they didn't leave, right? And not only that, they obviously brought in some additional players as well. But Kadir Copeland, Chris Bell, Malik Brown, all kind of role players, part-time players last year. Their roles are probably going to be increased this year, and obviously with the return of offensive stud Judah Mintz, see how his game progresses in a second year. Those would be big stories to tell. Not only Mintz, he's the headliner, but also these other players, how they step up in their second year back in Syracuse. So those are, and I guess the other point is, how is the loss of Jesse Edwards going to affect their team? He's dominating force on the defensive end, even though he fouled out regularly. He did improve in that front, but I think the team as a defensive unit kind of got used to him being there, almost too reliant on him. Jesse will cover for us, right? They can't do that at the high level game that the NCAA Division I level is. You need five players committed to defense to make that work, really. So in a certain sense, that might be a blessing in disguise, as much as it is to hurt to see him not finish his career there.
Well, and even too, you mentioned the zone defense not being used as much this year. That should help with that kind of foul share that happened.
Right.
With relying, as you just said, Jesse will get it. Don't worry about it. But then that could have caused Jesse Edwards to have so many foul outs that he had, was because the team defense was not being played. It was Jesse Edwards playing defense.
Right, exactly.
Playing man-to-man will help with that tremendously. My question for you is, do you think that Judah Mintz is going to take a sophomore jump or a sophomore slump?
Yeah, I see him making a jump. And you may not see it statistically in points per game,
right,
steals, that kind of thing, but I think you're going to see an overall improvement in his game this year from top to bottom. Defensive end, kind of those in-between stats, things that happen that turn into. So I'm going to measure his success kind of on team success. Obviously, the big picture for him is just, where is he? Does he stay is this his last year? Where does he fall in the draft if he goes that route, right? That'll be a way to measure it. But I see his game improving as an overall for sure.
Right. I think
he's got the drive.
If he has a good season, if he has an improved season, he's going to be a late first, early second round pick in the draft. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he could even jump in the lottery.
Exactly.
But you got other guys there as well, like J.J. Starling, new guy from Notre Dame. He was on the ACC all-freshman team. Then you've got a couple guys that didn't really get much playing minutes, but they were on teams in big name conferences. Chance Westry from Auburn and Kyle Cuffey Jr. from Kansas. I think if either of those guys is able to step up, they're both guards. If either one of them is able to step up and fill like a solid 6-man role, or at least a good role player off the bench, they're going to be guys that are good replacements for Judah Mintz once he ends up going into the NBA. But let's move on to team number 2, story number 2, the FAU Owls. Obviously, they shocked everyone last year, making it all the way to the Final Four. And they're moving from the Conference USA to the American Athletic Conference this upcoming season. Funny enough that usually you think the American Athletic Conference is a more prestigious conference, but last year the Conference USA was ranked 7th out of all conferences in RPI conference rankings, and the American Athletic was 10th. But the 4 seasons prior to last season, Conference USA wasn't even sniffing the top 10, and the American Athletic was in the top 10 every single year. So I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Conference USA was in kind of the final year of most of those teams being in that conference. So the drive to go out the winner was a step up compared to maybe previous years. And also FAU just being a better team added to that as well. We underrated them, but they were 13th in NET last year ahead of March Madness. So they were really unfortunately slept on. And everyone's back this year that can be back. You lost Michael Forrest, who was a key role player off the bench, to Swiss Pro from to the BBC Monthé. BBC Monthé is where he went to. But other than that, everyone's back. So I think the expectation needs to be the same this year from FAU. But what are kind of some road gaps that you think they could fall into in getting to that next level, or maybe even surpassing that, making it to the conference champion or March Madness championship and winning March Madness?
Right, exactly. Well, one, they had the fact that they had success. How does that in a whole off season of growth, of expectation changing? Right, last year they were, you could say they're the standard in my mind is they kind of rose together. Now that they've risen, how do they stay there together? That's the key, right? It's still a basketball game. So do egos getting into play? Well, I want more minutes. I need to get X number of shots up because I'm trying to get here down the road, right? Does that stay together? That's where, to me, where some of that pressure comes, is now there's an expectation, right? From a team perspective. Right. And the secondary thing is you got the expectation. You can't sneak up on people now. Everybody knows who you are.
Yeah.
Right. So how do they handle that situation? What new wrinkles do the players individually have in their games to help thwart the stem the tide of that wave coming at them? So those are a couple big challenges I see that they're going to have this year.
Yeah, I bet they were studied a lot by different teams this offseason. And the big question with everyone returning is that you don't really gain anyone either. So did you get better in the offseason? Is the question. So that falls a lot on Dusty May and his coaching staff, making sure that the players had good off-season workouts, that they gave them good stuff to work on, that those players bought into that scenario of what they needed to work on to make that jump. But it is good to see everyone back, that team chemistry is going to be there already. So
exactly. That's a great story to follow this year. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, if you're looking for an underneath headline, there's a great one right there. That program is going to be really fun to watch.
Absolutely. And then let's talk about a team that probably no one even is thinking about watching, but you should. You should watch these guys. And the reason why probably no one's paying attention to these guys at all is because they finished 14th in the Atlantic Sun last year, and that's Austin Peay. They only finished 9-22. They were 3-13 in conference play. Didn't even get to play in the conference tournament. But this team is different this year, and I just don't mean in the fact that they're coming in with different flair. They got 6 transfers in from Northwestern State, where Coach Corey Gibson also left to come to Austin Peay, who's also in the Northwestern State, was also second in the Southland last year, which I know what you're thinking. Southland, it's a low major conference, but Furman, who won the conference, ended up beating the 4-seed Virginia in March Madness last year in a huge, massive upset. There's also only one player on the roster from last year, their 8th best scorer Jalen Ware, who I project to be the starting 4. That's the only player that's on this roster from last year. So, Dad, tell me a little bit about Corey Gibson. Inform me on what exactly he's bringing into this program here. Right.
So Corey Gibson, number one, played his college ball at Austin Peay. Right. So that's where he began. He was part of some good teams back when he played. He's also after he graduated, he was a graduate assistant on the team. Worked there and then in a staff capacity before focusing on coaching basketball in various places across the country. And then last season was his first year as a head coach at Northwestern State that you had mentioned. Turned that team a plus 15 in the win department or in one season. So obviously did a fantastic job. The staff he has this year at Austin Peay is 100% made up of coaches that he had at Northwestern State last year. So what's it tell you about him as a coach and him as and what he has in mind as a program? That there's a strong set of people that believe in what he's doing. So that's, that's huge. Great continuity from season to season, even though they're changing to a different home. And following what Gibson brings to the table, his enthusiasm, his energy, his focus to me are infectious. I honestly couldn't stop watching videos of him and him talking to the media about what's important to him, about family, about service to others, like really foundationally committing yourself to serving others and how that builds character, and then obviously projecting that into basketball builds team, right? So that's really what his foundation is about. And again, I think it's a fantastic scenario, someone you really can get behind. We'll see. Can he add 15 wins to a 9-24 team this year? That would be a pretty nice record. And one other thing that they're bringing on top of new team, new coach, new staff, coaching staff and whatnot, and sports staff is a new arena, right? They have a brand new F&M Bank Arena arena that's just been finished, obviously good time for them to kind of bring that old energy back in and see where they go. Let's go P. Right,
let's go P. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be shouted a lot louder. It's going to be shouted a lot louder this year.
Yep, and I can see it.
That is their slogan, apparently, which is crazy.
Yep.
But with the player front, I mentioned that they had 6 players coming in from Gibson's Northwestern State team. And the highlight of that is DeMarcus Sharp, the guy who was the Southland Player of the Year, was on their defensive team. You also got Jamanta Black, who was on the second team for the Southland Conference last year. I think the main thing to watch out for is that it is the Southland Conference is where they were coaching last year and where they were playing last year. They're stepping up to a much higher prestige conference in the A-Sun. It's still not anywhere near the top conference in college basketball, but you're changing levels significantly. So that's the risk to watch out for with Austin Peay this year. But I think it's going to be a very good transition year. You also have a couple of D3 transfers in Cy Witt and Daniel Luce. Then you have Jordan Wilmore and Anton Brookshire, who Wilmore came from Northwestern State. Guy's 7'3", 352 pounds. Also was at Missouri before that, along with Anton Brookshire, was also at Missouri before joining Iona last year. He's a point guard that can come in off the bench and make significant changes. Also with Desi Jones as well, a transfer in from Quinnipiac. So a lot of new faces in Austin Peay. We'll see how they all join together. And then let's move on to our next team, which is Merrimack. So Merrimack recently announced that they'd be moving from the Northeast Conference into the MAC, that is the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, the MAAC, not the MAC, along with Sacred Heart next year. But Merrimack won their conference last year and didn't get to go to March Madness. And I know what you're thinking. Well, doesn't every team that gets a bid, doesn't every team get a bid that wins a conference? Right. And that wasn't the case with Merrimack because they were still reclassifying completely from Division I, and they weren't done leaving Division II yet. And
right. And it was unfortunate. You could look at the Merrimack team, and they're one of the best, historically one of the best defensive teams going around there. Right. They have like a relentless swarming zone defense. In fact, last year led the nation in turnover and steal percentage, and they earned the Warriors earned Ken Palm's best adjusted defensive efficiency rating. Was the highest one ever since you were born, 1998, right? It goes back that far. I don't know when Ken Palm started exactly, but that's a little while, right?
25 years.
25 years. The best rating ever.
Defensively, rating-wise, right. Yeah, 25.
Exactly. Right, and I know they lost some players here. So, Curtis? How do you see that impacting not only what they brought on the defensive end, but just overall, the losses that the graduates and whatnot that occurred on their team.
Right. Well, they lost their three top scorers in Jordan Minor, who's now at Virginia. He was the Northeast Conference co-player of the year. Lost Ziggy Reed, second best scorer to Youngstown State in the Horizon, and also lost Javon Bennett, their third best scorer to Dayton. But they did a good job of bringing guys that might make an impact back in. You got Malik Admead, who's coming back from Albany, and I say coming back because he used to be with Merrimack. He actually was on the Northeast Conference freshman team in 2021 when he was with them in his freshman season. He also played his sophomore season there before transferring to Albany. Then you got Semba Diallo, who's coming in from Manhattan. He sat out last year, but the 2 years before that, he was a captain on the Manhattan Jaspers in the MAC, where they're going to go next year. And the last year that he played in 2021, their MAC was the 13th ranked best conference out of all conferences. This guy is a workhorse. He's good for steals. Obviously, he brings leadership with captaincy. Then you get Jacob O'Connell from Princeton, who made that Sweet 16 run this past season. He did not play much on that team, but being around that energy, being around that type of chemistry when you are finding success in that locker room is a huge component into what you're going to bring to the next team. You've already seen what it looks like to win. Now it's your time to apply it. And I think if those three guys are able to step up and do that for Merrimack, we're going to see the same Merrimack team that we saw last year. And one thing to really note is that Merrimack in the Northeast Conference, who went instead of them into the March Madness tournament was FDU, who ended up upsetting the number one seed in the second ever number one upset that we've ever seen from a 16 seed. So it makes you think, hey, maybe Merrimack could have done the same exact thing. And
absolutely.
So I think they're in with them being in their last year in their conference, it's going to drive them even more. And also another addition to that is this is the first year that they actually can go to the March Madness tournament. So that entire locker room, I think, is going to be throttled on that exact goal in mind.
Right, exactly. I used to hate 16s beating ones or 15s beating twos. Now I love it. I think it's great. I think it's great. It's great for the game.
Well, it's really a bracket, right? Yeah.
Right. It kills brackets, but right, exactly. But no, I think it's an extra dynamic that and again shows how broad the college game is spread now with just the fact that 16s can beat ones, even ones that don't even win their tournament in this scenario here. In their conference tournament. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely. And now we want to move on to the Pac-12. The Pac-12 as a whole. We're not just doing one team here. It's the Pac-12 as a whole. I mentioned it earlier, and I mentioned it briefly with Merrimack just now, is that when conferences are in a mode where a lot of teams are leaving in the next year, they stepped up their conference play that season. The competitiveness was higher. A lot of people think that just because all these teams are going to the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC, that it's just like, all right, well, this season is a throwaway season. No, this is the season that everyone's going to want to prove that they are the top dog coming out of the Pac-12, that they're worthy to go into these next top conferences. So I think the Pac-12 is going to have a tremendous amount of basketball, high-class basketball being played this season. If you had to pick one team that was your sleeper team, Dad, who's it going to be?
For the Pac-12, I see Colorado. Right, they're a good team. I think we know that they've always been competitive. I don't know how you can be a kind of a underdog when you got Coach Prime in the football world, right? How do you sneak in them? But maybe they're being snuck in because Coach Prime's ego and his presence with the football program is so large. But I think Colorado's situated well from a team perspective, from a player perspective. They got a couple really, really superstar players there that I think can carry them.
Tristan De Silva, KJ Simpson. They just got Cody Williams this year.
Cody Williams, exactly. Right.
Freshman, very versatile point forward.
Exactly, right. So I can see them making waves for sure and kind of pushing the edge of the who are they going to upset? They're going to upset Arizona. They're going to upset USC, UCLA, even Oregon. Well, I'm a little bit down on Oregon this year, but I know I'm against the grain on that one. But I can see them creating havoc in the conference for sure. And looking at them as a team that's really kind of maybe hitting their stride at the right time when it comes to the makeup of the team and the coaching staff and the program as a whole. So how about yourself, Curtis? Who do you see as being a dark horse in this last year of the Pac-12?
Right. Well, real quick before we move on to my dark horse, I wanted to mention as well a guy that you're big on, Eddie Lampkin. He's didn't end well with TCU, but that's another. I mentioned a big center before. He's another big center, 6'11", 230 pounds. Like this man's, he could be a beast.
Right, and thanks for mentioning him too. Yeah, the research I did on him, it was kind of that, like we were talking about in the last segment, about a player that needed a change, that was kind of got stuck, and a change of scenery might do him well in life too. So let's see how he can progress and maybe untap that potential, but what's in him there as a human being, and turn that into top-notch basketball play. He's got the potential to do that. So it'll be really fun to watch to see how he develops. Right? I'd forgotten to mention him for sure. Good point.
Yeah, well, you and I both know how a change of scenery can really change someone's life. We'll get into that maybe on a later podcast here at ACORN'S Sports. But now, you asked me my sleeper team. I think it's going to be California. The Golden Bears are, I think, due for a bounce-back season. They had a lot of injuries last year that hindered them. They got Mark Madsen in as a new head coach in his first year. He was 70-51 at Utah Valley. Was in the NIT last year. And you bring Devin Askew, who is fully healthy this year. He was 9th in the pack for points per game out of all people, starting just 13 games though before he ended up getting injured. You bring in Jalen Tyson and Fardas Amac from Texas Tech, who really were able to swing things around at the end of last season. And then Amac also ended up playing under Mark Madsen while he was at Utah State, and he tested the draft waters both times there while he was at Utah State. So I think he's going to be maybe one of the, if not the best transfer addition for a team in the entire NCAA for this upcoming season.
Right, that's a lot to say right there. There's been a lot, and even in the Pac-12, right on its own, there was a lot of transfers in from other schools, from overseas and whatnot. So yeah,
it just makes sense. You play under the guy before where you were really successful, and you've already proven that you can play at a top level. I mean, Amac was hurt for most of last year with a foot injury, but then when he came back, he helped propel them to being much better in the second half of the season than they were in the first half.
Right.
So I think Amac's going to be one of the best transfers overall. And Jalen Tyson I love too, because he's kind of like that Grant Williams type of player, where he just does the little things right. There'll be days where he's the best scorer, and then there's days where he won't score that much, but he's going to work hard on the defensive end every single night.
Great. You got to have those kinds of players to make things work for sure.
Absolutely. All right, let's move into the last segment with that. And before we move into the last segment, I want to ask you, what team in the Pac-12 do you think is going to be a front runner this year, or a shocker that you do not think that most people will expect to actually be good this year, but they will be great? Tell us who you think your Pac-12 favorite is. All right, last segment, ACORN'S Attic. So, who is ACORN? What is the Attic? Dad, give me some background into this, because this is your segment here.
Right, exactly. Well, ACORN'S Attic. Acorn, what is an acorn? Well, it's a nut, first of all. We're both a little bit nuts. You're a hockey goalie. You got to be a little bit nut, right? No, ACORN'S Attic, totally out of the blue, coincidence. Last basketball season, about a month into the season, I walk into practice. Two of the girls come over and greet me, and the one says to me, "Hey, coach, what's your last name?" I'm like, "Acker. Why do you ask?" And she looks at the other one. "See, I told you it's Acker. It's not Acorn." So yeah, the one of our players had unfortunately misheard or whatever, and thought our last name was Acorn. So then that became my rally cry. That became my name for the team. I was Coach Acorn. When you came in during your break from college, you were Little Acorn, right? or whatever it might be, and helped out. And
I prefer Acorn Jr. instead of Little Acorn, but
right, but it just worked. So yeah, like I said, it became a rally cry. I'm assuming it's going to continue this year. We'll see what happens, but I like it, and I think ACORN'S Attic obviously is the attic being my head, what goes on in my head, what drives me, what drives us. We're very similar minded people. So what drives us to of interest, how we process the world, how we process life, how we process problems. That's really what this segment is about. Obviously, we like to relate it to sports, because this is about sports, but we also, more importantly, want to relate our experiences to everybody as father, son, as it relates to life in general. So, with that, Curtis, I know you wanted to start the segment off with some quotes from the Bible.
Yes. Want to read off some verses. So, first one's going to come from Philippians 4:8, which says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things." Then the next one comes from Proverbs 17:22, "A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up bones." And lastly, from Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." Now, that's just a call out to all Christians out there. Please do not be ashamed of believing. Don't be scared to share verses from the Bible, because they will help people, and your joyful spirit will be good medicine. It won't dry up bones from others around you. So with that, let's get into our today's topic, which is positive thinking.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, those verses are in that relationship. I definitely, the Proverbs 17:22, "Joyful heart is good medicine," thinking positively. So what does positive thinking mean to me? I mean, the general is obvious. You think about, try to think things in a happy way, and it makes you feel happy. But how do you go about doing that? Or how do I go about doing that? And for me, it's a mindset that any problem you face, there is a solution out there. We have confidence that there is some way out of a scenario, or even just through something that's good, I want to make better. There's always a solution out there, and the process of evaluating and continuing to evaluate problems and with that mindset, I can make something better. I can solve this problem that comes my way. To me, that's fundamental to positive thinking, and really visualizing that success. Right, the next step into me to that is visualizing. How does that happen? Well, I got to think about it in a sense of I know I'm going to make it happen. Right, and visualizing the way that is, blocking out the negative energy, and thinking about the visualization that there is, and then obviously you focus that energy towards that goal. Really, just energizing it. That's the third step of it, is energizing yourself.
Is that what you mean?
Reactions.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. Rather than being lost on what can go wrong, let me just channel that energy towards that successful path and putting some game plan into action.
Right.
So, and really, to me, and then there's really four elements. The fourth element towards positive thinking that I've learned, this I did. I think the first three for me I kind of had naturally. The fourth one definitely not, that I've learned, is to learn how to laugh at yourself. Right? We're not all perfect. We're absolutely not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to trip and fall, and we're going to be called Acorn, right? But laughing at ourselves, embracing that difference of people, embracing your faults, and turning those into positive experiences for yourself and for others. To me, that really helps drive and focus your energy again on positive, successful situations. I try to apply that in life. I certainly try to apply these principles in coaching, and to deliver a message that kind of follows in lines with this stuff. For me, it works.
Yeah, well, I mean, even in coaching and fatherhood, as you said, try to apply those things. And even from a son or a player's perspective, you got to try to apply those things too. Like when you get corrected, I know, that's a big part of going from a young man or a young boy to a young man, is really I know that was a big moment for me, at least, in rekindling our relationship to become a strong one, was that, okay, maybe this guy isn't correcting me because he's trying to bring me down. He's actually trying to help me avoid mistakes that he's made previously. And the same thing goes into student learning from a coach. That, okay, well, you're not seeing these good things that I'm doing right. You're just pointing out what I'm doing wrong. But wait a minute. If I refocus my thinking and say, okay, well, he's pointing these things out that I'm doing wrong because he wants me to be that much better, is really just eye-opening and something that you maybe can't think about when your ego's in the way. Well, I love the topic that you had for today with ACORN'S Addict. I feel like it really related to pretty much every single story that we had today. Duke thinking positively about the fact that they might become that next Blue Blood franchise dynasty again. Both of the players, Mgbako and Tomlin, maybe getting a second chance. Obviously, Tomlin elsewhere and Mgbako in-house to really successfully do what it is they're supposed to do in life correctly this time. Then you've also got all teams, Syracuse getting rid of Boeheim, but having a great insight and great look into the new future that they can establish. FAU maybe being in their own heads about if they can make it to the same spot that they did last year, but instead they're thinking positively going into this season, saying we're going to do better than what we did last year. We're going to reach those expectations. Austin Peay had a horrible season last year, but now you got all new guys, a new stadium, a new coach, new coaching staff in there. The potential is maybe unlimited in what they can do. The Merrimack Warriors are now in a place where they can actually make the March Madness tournament. They might say, oh, you know what, we lost our main guys. What are we going to do? We're not going to be able to even make it there this year. No, we got these new guys in. We're going to be able to be even better. We're going to prove that we should have earned that spot last year. We earned that spot last year, and we're going to prove why this year that we still deserve it. And then the Pac-12, every single team has a chance here to go out on top. So I think it was a great ACORN'S Addict choice for that type of thinking.
Yeah, but I even want to even add in especially with the Pac-12 scene, as a fan, I think that for me the headlines that I've read since all the announcements of all the teams of vacating the Pac-12 have been very negative. They're oh my God, these rivalries that we've had for years are gone, and I agree. That's a sad thing to think about. Rivalries, some of the rivalries that are gone, some of them will still be there. But I look at it again, looking at it in a positive light. There's this, who knows what's out there, right? The Pac-12 came, maybe something better is going to happen. Maybe a mega conference is a good thing. I don't know why it would be necessarily, but I'm going to look at it as a fan, and I'll encourage others to do that as there's an opportunity for something new to come along that we're not even aware of as of yet. But looking at it that way, it's going to create great basketball this year, like you had said, several times. What teams are going to rise up? What teams are going to be kind of looking down the road a little bit? Players or coaches or teams, or riding it out. But I just think there's opportunity for something different, something new to come along, and who knows what that'll turn into. So.
So keep that positive outlook on it, because you don't know. This could end up turning into a better scenario than what we already had. Well, with the end of that, I think that's all the time that we've got here left on Accurate Sports for this podcast. Follow us on X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, along with subscribing on YouTube, once again, under the handle Accurate B-Ball. That's ACKERATBBALL. If you have stories we'd like to cover, comments on what you'd like to see, or anything else, please email accurateball@gmail.com. That's ACKERATBBALL@gmail.com. Signing off for myself, Curtis D. Acker, Mark Acker, my father. Let's go P.
Let's go Cuse, let's go P. You got it.
Thanks for joining, y'all. Wait, before you go, just wanted to thank you once again for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at Curtis Acker. You can follow me on Instagram under @Curtis_D_Acker. Also subscribe to my other YouTube channel, Curtis D. Acker, all together. Once again, wanted to thank you for watching, and God bless you.